Talk me through what went on yesterday. Did you intend to get thrown out of the House of Commons?
No, no, not at all. Um, I think I've got a responsibility, Matt, to tell it as I see it and tell it as many of my constituents right across the United Kingdom have been saying, and that is that on the basis of the evidence that the Prime Minister has been lying repeatedly and he has misled the House of Commons. And indeed, I would say in my defence, Matt, that I led for the SNP an opposition day in November where I sought to put down a censure on the Prime Minister and was permitted under the context of that debate to talk about the Prime Minister lying. And in fact, even in Prime Minister's questions last week, I did talk about the Prime Minister having misled the House. So this is not something that I did for the first time. And I think I've got a responsibility to, if I could use the phrase, speak truth to power. So I certainly wasn't doing it on the basis that it was some kind of preordained stunt to get thrown out. Nothing could be farther from the truth. It was about doing my job and standing up for constituents.
What happens to you in that situation? I mean, we should explain. I suppose let's explain first of all. The particular issue is saying in the House of Commons, the rules are you can't say someone has lied or misled the House of Commons. And what the Commons Speaker Lindsay Hoyle was trying to do was say if you just say he's inadvertently misled the House, that would be okay. But your contention is that he's done it deliberately, and this is particularly to do with saying I was assured there were no parties, and now he appears to be accepting the outcome of the Sue Gray update, which is that there were parties.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, this is important because if you mislead the House of Commons, then that in itself is a resignation matter. And we know fine well that the Prime Minister did state in the Chamber on the 8th of December that parties didn't take place. Now, we now know that that is the case. We now know, obviously, in the back of the Sue Gray report, there were 16 different parties and 12 different days. So the question is why has the Prime Minister not corrected the record? And why, on the basis of that, has he not resigned? And obviously, I talked about the party on the 20th of December. I've raised that previously. But let's not forget that a Labour MP, Catherine West, also raised the issue of the 13th of November, where there were two parties, one actually in the Prime Minister's own flat. At the end of the day, Matt, when you're in public life, there ought to be standards. And if you've misled the House of Commons, there have to be repercussions. And I suppose we're used to over the years, time after time, this Prime Minister getting away with things that nobody else has. I was very careful when I got up on my feet yesterday to praise the integrity, the honesty, and the decency of Theresa May, who had spoken just before me. Now, lots of things I disagree with Theresa May on, but she's a woman that understood the burdens of office and how you're expected to behave. These are not characteristics that the current Prime Minister has.
I just wonder more broadly what impact this has had, do you think, on public attitudes towards politicians more generally? Is this harming the public's view of all politicians?
Yes, it is, and I think it's a really important question that you ask, and it's one that I'm concerned about. And I do think that the public will tar us all with the same brush, and it really is important that the public can have confidence in the politicians, that people can feel that they should come and take part and participate in public life. But I would argue that everything that's gone on over the course of the last 2.5 years, when you see the Prime Minister shutting down Parliament, when that was found to be illegal in the highest court of the land, where the government's been found guilty over the last few weeks of illegal COVID contracts. You'll remember from the VIP lane, from those that had some kind of association with senior Conservative members of the government. I could go on and on about the behaviour which is simply not acceptable from a government. There is that whiff of corruption and of sleaze, and it's really important that we restore confidence in our public life.
And what can realistically be done about that? Because does it all just depend on Conservative MPs acting? I mean, you've got a couple of dozen MPs behind you, but there's not much you can do, is there, apart from getting thrown out and getting on the news?
Well, look, in a sense, the harsh reality is the only people today that can remove the Prime Minister are Conservative MPs, and I would implore them to do that. Some would argue that for us in the SNP, perhaps having Boris Johnson in power is an advantage, but I'm much more concerned about where we are. Matt, let me just say to you, one of the things that, of course, we're all concerned about at the moment is the situation between Russia and Ukraine. And I've commended the Defence Secretary for the way that he's behaved and the way that he's made sure that myself and Keir Starmer have been given Privy Council briefings when it's right to do so. None of us, myself or the Labour leader, have a relationship with Number 10. The normal protocols don't exist. And that grieves me. It's not good enough. We need to get back to the set of circumstances when how this place can operate properly. And at the moment, it's not.
Just wondering why I've got you in Blackford. Where are we on the march towards a second independence referendum?
Well,
When will it happen?
um, well, if you recall, the SNP won the election in Scotland last year. We have a mandate from the people of Scotland to have a referendum, and the First Minister has signalled that once we got through the pandemic in the second half of 2023, then we will look to have that referendum, and the government will be publishing a number of papers over the coming weeks and months, building on the prospectus for the type of country that Scotland will be. And you talk about standards in public life and our public discourse, and my message to those on the other side is, let's have a respectful debate. It's not about us being right and the other side being wrong, but let's have that debate about what kind of country we can be. And yes, of course, we can contrast the modern democracy that Scotland can be as an independent country, and we can contrast that with what is happening with Westminster.
Is what's happening in Westminster, Boris Johnson, parties and so on, is that making Scottish independence more likely, do you think?
I think it helps bring a focus to the argument, but I would say that whether or not Scotland becomes independent should be based on the preface of the type of country we can be. We can debate individual prime ministers. I want people to have the confidence that we can build that fairer country, build that greener country, one that would put us back at the heart of Europe. But it needs to be about driving investment into the economy, driving up productivity, creating that better society that we all want to see.